1040 WHO. From the Hy-Vee Studios.
News Radio 1040
WHO.
Lost Egypt, now at the Science Center of Iowa.
Views expressed are those of the host, guests, and callers, not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
Good morning, friends. Welcome to our Wednesday morning get-together. Mickelson here with you. We're going to talk politics during the first hour. I have lots and lots of open night time. I've got some of the most delicious sound from some of the Occupy people, one of which I didn't get a chance to talk with you about this yesterday, but they showed up at City Council the other night demanding their space down at that park. They want to continue to occupy. They use the terms, "We have earned this space." And their argument, I'll let you hear this because it's just absolutely amazing. And we were talking about that case of the school there, Nottoway, and they had these wrestlers physically abusing fellow wrestlers. And I'm not going to get into that particular thing right now, but the system is, rather than resorting to what you and I would consider the appropriate response to this, they're running the template. They're calling these behaviors hazing. These behaviors were not hazing. We'll get to that later. Right now, though, Congressman Tom Latham is here in the studio. Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard.
It's great to be with you, Jan.
It's a pretty day, isn't it?
It is beautiful. It's going to get a little cooler the way it sounds from what we've experienced. Some great weather for January, that's for sure.
I was thinking that all those guys who went out and bought those $30,000 pickup trucks and put those snow blades up in front, hey, honey, I can make money all winter. I can pay the payments on my truck just by working on weekends and clearing driveways. It'll pay for itself, honey.
Jan, it's still January. There's plenty of time.
There really is.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any connection left, a working awareness of the seed industry and that part of the business, and because that's sort of your family heritage, right, isn't it?
Well, I don't have my ownership anymore of our family business. I sold to my brother and my nephew here a couple of years ago. But yeah, the seed industry is something that's very near and dear to my heart.
I was reading some stories that there's possibility of shortage of seeds this spring.
From my understanding, with the drought last year and some of the weather conditions, I think I'd heard like 20 different hurricane force winds throughout the state last year, that a lot of the seed crop was hurt, and the yields weren't as good because of the dry weather.
Well, then the last time we had wet springs, and
right,
a couple of times they had to replant,
right,
and that's using seed twice, and that uses up supply too.
Right, and yeah, you won't have the carryover from previous years, that's for sure.
Is it precipitous, or is it something we should be concerned about?
I think you'll find, there's production in other parts of the world, South America, that will be brought into the U.S. So I think they'll be adequate. You may not get exactly which variety your first choice.
Is it similar? Are they using our stuff, or are we using theirs, or it's all the same?
It's U.S. companies that, to hedge themselves, basically have some production down there.
Okay. Well, you came over here this morning. You're introducing some legislation. It says to introduce a measure forcing Congress to do its job. Okay, I'll bite.
What a unique idea, right? Yeah, but this is just earth-shattering.
Then why are you in Iowa? Then you should be back in Washington.
We go back next week, and I'm going to be dropping legislation in the hopper that will say basically, if Congress does not pass a budget, a joint resolution of a budget, that Congress doesn't get paid, and the members, their staff, the expenses that Congress has will stop as of May 15th. And it is outrageous in my mind, and a fundamental duty of Congress to pass a budget. We're $15 trillion in debt, and the Senate...
That equals all the wealth of the country.
Well, yes. Oh, absolutely. The gross domestic product, absolutely. And what has happened, it's been it'll be 3 years now since the Senate has, with Harry Reid, has even attempted to pass a budget. The year before last, when Nancy Pelosi was still Speaker, they failed to pass a budget then. Last year, we passed a budget in the Republican-led House of Representatives, but the Senate, just because they didn't want their members to have to take difficult votes. I mean, I don't know what we get paid for if it isn't to actually vote and have our positions known to the public. But when we're this far in debt, there is without a budget, there are no spending controls in place. You set no priorities as far as where the spending goes. So what my legislation says is that you will not give any outlays, payment to members of Congress, to their staff, to activities in Congress until that budget is passed.
All right, so what's the likelihood of that passing?
I think to bring the attention and to focus on the U.S. Senate, which has not done its job, is extraordinarily important. Will Harry Reid, he'll probably put it, if we pass it in the House, he'll probably put it in the pile of other bills that he's ignoring that have passed the House also. I
was talking with a fellow the other day, says the recess appointments of some of Obama's newfound agencies that he's invented, it happened in a recess that didn't exist. Are you guys on recess now? Was it formally declared that you were?
No, we have not formally adjourned. We're in pro forma. Every 3 days we come in, gavel in and gavel out.
So you're not
It is unprecedented in our history of this country for the president to do what he did with these recesses and what he says are recess appointments when we're not in recess.
Well, keep in mind, this is an ongoing scam. Well, I hate to say it this way, but both of you guys, both parties that do this, that in order to keep presidents from making recess appointments, you never recess. Democrats have done this, and you guys have done this. And you're trying to do it now, and this president says, "I know what you're doing. I have a mandate to lead, and I'm going to have to bypass Congress."
His own Justice Department has said it's unconstitutional what he did. But they went ahead and have made these appointments to the Consumer Protection Board, to the National Labor Relations Board, because he has to put forth his agenda. He wants to write new regulations. He wants to, with the National Labor Relations Board, basically write new law as far as relationships with the unions and the employers.
Mainly to keep one company from moving to South Carolina.
Well, that issue actually has been resolved itself.
In what way?
With Boeing is going to South Carolina. They've had to make huge concessions to basically have the board back off. But no, they're going to go in and make rulings that will directly affect the ability for unionization of different industries, make it much easier. And upset the entire balance that's been in place before. It's an activist group that he's got in place. They previously did not have a quorum, so that they couldn't.
Well, if they're doing something unconstitutional, what do you guys intend to do about it?
Well, the House has a resolution of disapproval. The Senate, there are a group of senators getting together right now that are going to have a lawsuit against the president. And what happens with the Labor Relations Board is one thing, but this appointment to this Consumer Protection Agency is very concerning because the way Dodd-Frank, the bank reform bill, was written, that they are funded out of the Federal Reserve.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
And so we do not have the purse string control of that agency.
Is that constitutional?
I don't. That's the way the bill was passed. And
when did the Federal Reserve become a political agency and a funding stream?
It should not be. I mean, they're gone way outside of what their duties are to begin with.
Well, so again, the question is, what do you guys intend to do about it?
We're going to have to. You're not going to have Harry Reid in the Senate or the President sign a bill that would reform that. And so what it's going to take is a new president and different control in the United States Senate, and we will do away with that provision.
The previous ways you deal with aberrant agencies is to defund them. You say, they anticipated this move. Dodd-Frank anticipated. Absolutely. Now you have two disgraced politicians out of office. Right. Barney's not even running again because he knows. Well,
he's still there.
He's still there until his term expires. Right. But you've got these two disgraced politicians, in essence, circumventing their own legislative branch, giving unconstitutional executive authority to the office of the presidency. This is a constitutional crisis, and writing notes of disapproval is not sufficient. And waiting for this president to be voted out, I don't think is sufficient. Well, these are impeachable offenses, aren't they?
It was passed by the Congress with a Democrat control in the last Congress, signed by the president into law.
No, well, they're talking about the first off, the recess appointments.
Appointments is, absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, they're unconstitutional. It's going to be challenged. There's in court, there's going to be lawsuits, all of these things to do it. But
these guys can tie you in knots for years over this stuff, though.
Well, that's why we've got to change who's in the White House, because this can be changed overnight. When the first day a new president's inaugurated with executive orders, we can change.
Did Dodd-Frank have any redeeming qualities to it, and despite the little time bombs and the little unconstitutional sides?
There is no question that there needed to be reform of regulations of some of these out-of-control practices that were in place before this, certainly. The interesting thing is that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, who were the biggest culprits in our whole meltdown as far as the housing and our economic recession that we went through, there's not one word in the bill about Freddie or Fannie. And what this particular agency also that's been put in place, this Consumer Protection Agency, are going to be writing regulation. Before, without a director, they couldn't put the regulations out there. And now with a director in place, they will start regulating, and the focus is going to be on your small hometown community banks. They're going to regulate basically to the point where they cannot afford to comply, and it has nothing to do with safety and soundness of those financial institutions.
This is basically the big boys squeezing out the little boys.
And the big boys from New York City are the ones who supported Dodd-Frank. Gee, I wonder why. Because it limits competition. Anytime that you have overreach of the federal government with regulations, it's only the biggest corporations, whatever they are, biggest businesses that are able to have the staff to be able to comply with these regulations. That cashier in your hometown bank on Main Street, who has other duties to do and is also the compliance officer, does not have the time. That bank cannot afford to hire 2 more people for compliance officers. And again, it has nothing to do with safety and soundness of that bank. It's just basically a activist wish list coming out of an agency that we have no control over at this point, because they're funded through the Federal Reserve, who will just print the money to pay them.
All right. So again, the next question: what do you intend to do about it?
It's going to take a new administration, and you can stop it immediately when we get a control of the White House and the U.S. Senate.
Which of the
House of
current aspirants for this office understand it the way you understand it, and are willing to do something about it?
From the candidates that I've heard speak on the issue, every one of them has a stack of executive orders that they will sign the first day as far as rolling back some of these outrageous regulations that are putting such a wet blanket on our whole economy. We'll have bills in place immediately to repeal those provisions, at least hold people accountable. There is no accountability. This is like the health care bill, where you've got this 15-member panel out there that has no congressional review, no judicial review, no executive oversight. They basically will make decisions as to your health care and have no one looking over their shoulders, and no one can say a thing about it. Whatever decision they make is final.
The treachery of the political class to engage a piece of legislation that transfers the funding stream to a congressional jurisdiction like this is such an egregious, outrageous, evil attack on the balance of powers in this country. I don't understand how it got past. Couldn't it have been filibustered, or was this even known, or was this buried in the fine print?
No, it was known at the time, and it was certainly back. That's when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, and they had control of the House of Representatives. They had overwhelming control of the Senate. They were able to push it through, and this.